In about 5 weeks, we're going to learn just how much the government is spending. That's when Prime Minister Mark Carney's government, the Finance Minister, Minister Champagne, will table his first budget.
Recently, I said that this Prime Minister was just as irresponsible with money as Justin Trudeau, and I now realize that that was unfair to Justin Trudeau. How is it even possible for this Prime Minister to be more fiscally incompetent than the drama teacher?
This government is conducting a comprehensive spending review. This government is building houses. This government is building projects in the national interest. This government is building Canada strong. Come join us.
And you can come join us on November 4th when we cover that budget, because the Prime Minister is warning of a substantial deficit, and that could be losing Mark Carney some key potential parliamentary votes.
They will face Canadians and Quebecers with an unbelievable deficit, which looks like madness. I don't see how. I cannot see how we could support a budget which is first based on some taxes reductions, electoral gifts, and some fantasies in many regards. I cannot support that. I don't see how we could support that.
Okay, so Kate, a couple of things jump out for me there. One, Justin Trudeau still catching strays. Yeah. He's gone.
That's gonna happen for a while.
Very unfair. But second, the Bloc Québécois was looking for a permanent increase in the old age security payments last year, right? Which was billions of extra dollars a year.
Excuse me while I pick my jaw up off the floor of the Bloc Québécois talking about the inappropriateness of electoral gifts in the budget.
Yes, but that is, we haven't seen the budget. We know what the PBO says. We know what other people say. We don't know what the deficit actually is, but that is not a good sign in a minority parliament for that position to be taken today.
No, and I think the Bloc is in a pretty reactive place. We also saw news today that the U.S. is lobbying hard, but not to anybody's surprise, but lobbying very hard for a crack at the dairy market. Obviously, they have key industries that are being hit hard in the province by tariffs. And a lot of change happening in the province as it relates to critical minerals and failed battery plants and a number of things that are going on. So they are reacting to a moment, I think, where they are seeing Quebec not achieve much. And so they are dangling early, I think, what they would like to see, or at least letting the government know that they will need to be convinced in order to support this. And when you look at the dynamics of the House in terms of how that plays out in numbers, puts the NDP in a very challenging spot to almost definitely support this. I know Don Davies was not particularly effusive one way or the other, but I think that this is the opening of a negotiation, I would think, for the Bloc, as it always is around budget time. Yeah. If you want our support, show us the money.
Yeah, I don't know if Mark Carney will negotiate with the Bloc, Jordan, based on his answers when he's asked about a parliamentary arrangement with the NDP back after the election. Don Davies, he recklessly said he won't prejudge a budget he hasn't seen, but the math does math against him, right? And that the NDP, who do not want an election right now, might be forced to either abstain or support or else risk Parliament here.
Well, look, it's early days. We still have, I think you're exactly right. These are the opening rounds in a bargaining situation that maybe Prime Minister Carney's unaware that he's in, but he is in it.
He's got a lot of negotiations going on.
There will always be horse trading, particularly when votes are going to be as close as they are. And I think, it's important to remember that we are talking about a pretty slim number of votes that would be required in terms of people getting the parliamentary flu or staying home in some other way. It's you only, assuming the Liberals have all their votes, you only need 3 from any party. So it's not a terribly tall order to find that. I don't think it means that the New Democrats need to support this budget. And in fact, I have a really hard time imagining that there's any scenario in which it makes political sense for them to support the budget. This has been framed up as an austerity budget that's going to be making serious cuts to public services, that's going to be rolling back on climate commitments, where we haven't seen robust support for workers and people who are facing unemployment. There's not a lot in the window for the NDP right now, and it's tough to see what the Prime Minister might be willing to give them that could bring them on board. So I think it's going to be a math game for the government. I hope their whip's office is very well rested. But you know, at the end of the day, I think it's still very likely this budget is going to pass, but accidents do happen.
Yeah. Yes, austerity and investment, Jordan.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
what,
It's all things to all people.
and we'll have to
We'll
how-
see. I
yeah.
look forward to the
I
unfolding.
mean, look,
of the
I
mystery.
understand what they're saying. It's just we need to see the details. And look, I am not, Amanda, trying to, gin up any false drama that we're headed to an election and the government's going to fall on this. But it could force you to alter your plans, right, in terms of what you want to do in the budget versus what you have to do in the budget to get things through. I mean, what do you make of what Mr. Blanchet had to say and how you see this dynamic maybe playing out?
Well, there's theater and then there's Blanchet's theater, and we are very familiar with what this looks like. We remember all of the, the many votes over the last sessions, and he would find his time to get up to the mic prior to those votes and make his grandstanding case. And this works well for him, right? Because I think otherwise, where is the relevance on the federal scene? Like, how does he attract that kind of attention? And I think that this is one area that he's quite successful at when, he makes these big statements, uses a lot of rhetoric that he knows will play well in his home province of Quebec. At the same time, I agree with everything Jordan said. This is a numbers game. There are 3 votes away. I don't think anyone thinks that this budget won't pass. I think that would be crazy because nobody wants to go to an election right now. So while I would just chalk it up to a little bit of theater on Blanchet's part and potentially, yes, the beginning of a bit of a negotiation, although I'm not sure how much negotiation is necessary on the part of the government right now.
Well, and Tanya, there's no big demands out there. I know Pierre Poilievre basically says, pass all of my ideas as sort of his solution to things, but there's no big
Mark
demand.
Carney's working on it.
I was going to say, if you wait long enough, I think you might get his wish.
Touche. But like,
Well, that's what Poilievre said, or Blanchet said today. You have Pierre Poilievre in the Prime Minister's office. He's a conservative in a red dress. So he didn't say dress.
Sorry, I was going to say, let's not start any rumors here on the show. But what is there to negotiate here? Is what I wonder.
I don't
right?
know
like, if there is
that there's something to negotiate, because I think 2 things I took away from that scrum with Mr. Blanchet. And by the way, I love Blanchet theater in French and English. But he pretty clearly said there's no consultation going on whatsoever with this PMO and any of the opposition parties. And I find that interesting. 30 days out from roughly a budget that's billed as, and I'm going to say austerity budget, because the rest is, let's see. There's no talking to the opposition parties in a minority parliament. Interesting. And the other thing I took away from what he said is he criticized pretty much all on the postal strike, on the deficit, everything you can think of federally that's being done right now, the projects, an oil pipeline. He slammed the federal government at every turn as a centralizing force that's not well managed. And so that's playing into his argument in Quebec in a year ahead of what's expected to be an election that will see an independent or a sovereigntist party elected and potentially leading down the road to a referendum. He has promised to build that case in Parliament and outside Parliament this year, and I think we always have to hear him in that context.
Kate, I don't know what consultation is happening with the various parties. I do, earlier today, I was going to open up this email. Elizabeth May was asked about the budget pre-question period. She confirmed she is going to have a meeting with the Prime Minister very soon. So they will be speaking to the Greens. I don't know if
That's
you
one vote.
No, there you go. So,
I need 2 more.
Only 2 to go.
But I don't know if you then move your way up through the standings. Is that how you do it?
That would be odd.
I don't know. But there's some conversations seemingly happening.
I don't think it is a stretch to suggest that a lot of the consultation is happening at 80 Wellington Street and nowhere else. I think about some of the recent announcements that have happened, and they seem to take members of the Liberal caucus by surprise in terms of the details contained therein. So the central agency and the PMO is behaving very much as a central agency. You had the House Leader on a couple weeks ago when Parliament started talking about who he was willing to work with and maybe those that he wasn't so willing to work with. If this is being developed in a vacuum, the budget being developed in a vacuum and negotiations around it, I think that would be very typical of the Prime Minister's management style to date.
Well, Stephen McKinnon, in the morning of that day of that interview, Jordan said, we're going to have a budget in October. And then when he sat down with me at 5 o'clock, he said, well, we'll have it soon. And then we found out it was November. So things are changing.
Sort of like when
right?
the defense policy was announced while the minister was on a plane. Like there's a real pattern in that behavior. And and I think, and this is something that Tonda wrote about this week, this is a government that has a problem communicating not just with Canadians about what it is that they're up to and how they're delivering results, but even within their own caucus. So they have a significant challenge ahead of the budget to tell the story about the sacrifice that they're talking about for the potential long-term gain that they're laying out, but they need to be communicating more with Canadians about what's going on, and that hasn't really been happening. It's very internally focused. So I think that they've got challenges there, not just in communicating with the other parties, but in building the overall narrative for this budget in a way that actually makes sense to people on the ground.
Amanda, do you see it that way, that there's an issue communicating with Canadians here? The public opinion numbers would suggest that the Prime Minister's personal numbers remain high, even if there has been some erosion since the election, which is a normal course of things. I mean, do you think they're in that kind of a situation yet? Because this is going to be a complex budget by all signs, and it's going to need a narrative.
Yeah, well, I think it's the nature of the complex time, though, as well. It's not just solely focused on the budget and delivering the budget messages. We have, the Prime Minister in different areas of the globe negotiating with other leaders to find new arrangements in the wake of the Trump tariffs. And so there's a lot of narratives at play at the same time, although they're doing quite a bit of telegraphing. They're talking about a substantial deficit. They're saying that it's a result of the tariff supports, of tax cuts for affordability. So and for defense spending. So they are telegraphing some of it. And I would say the other thing on whether or not the Prime Minister is speaking to Blanchet or speaking to anybody else, just because he's not speaking to Blanchet or the office isn't speaking to Blanchet doesn't mean that they're not speaking to others. So I don't know that that's necessarily an accurate portrayal of what's happening. I would imagine with the budget just being a few weeks away that those discussions are underway, and I don't think they're just happening in the PMO.
Tana, on the communications issue, I mean, there's communications issues that this town and this profession gets seized with, and then there's there's normal Canadians and their communication and conversation with the direction of government. How do you see it? Do you think there is a broader challenge that this government is facing in terms of reaching the people who just elected them back in October?
I think 6 months into Carney's government, we have seen a pattern of a reluctance, a reticence to be more open to Canadians more broadly. And I'm not talking about answering emails from journalists. I'm talking about explaining rationales for policy, debates around policy options, explaining once the policy is adopted, what's really going on behind it. For example, yesterday's loan to Algoma. I mean, trying to parse through exactly what the government's conditions are for that and the rationale for it has taken us 2 days. So I do see that they have a bit of a problem and a reticence to do some of this work. And I think to Jordan's point, it's not just about political marketing of something, it's also social acceptance of something. I think that if the government is planning, the cuts at the level that they seem to be telegraphing, you get buy-in from people if you treat them like adults and explain some of it. And so maybe, sure, we can all wait till they start spinning it November 5th. But I think that the government itself could do everybody a favor by speaking about its tariff strategy, its trade talks, its international discussions with CEOs abroad on trade diversification, on budget cuts, all of that. I think they could do a better job of explaining that to Canadians. And I think it is very much sort of a corporate, his corporate leanings.
Yes.
It's Mark Carney as CEO of an asset management firm called the Government of Canada.
Yes, he doesn't want to communicate on process, but more decision points and outcomes.
Yeah, actions, and we'll let you know when we have something to let you know about. And that's Stephen Harper. My God, how many times did he tell us? I'll tell you, I'll make an announcement when I have something to announce.
But Stephen Harper also did a fair bit of retail politics. That's what's missing for Prime Minister Carney.
That's the difference.
So if Prime Minister Carney is unable to articulate for Canadians in a palatable way the status of trade diversification, the negotiations with Canada, U.S., all of the things that he was elected to do, and he's also unable to communicate on crime and immigration and housing and affordability policies, what on earth is he communicating on? And he was elected to do the former, not hearing much there, and he's therefore leaving the lane open on the retail political issues.
Okay, quickly from Jordan, then Amanda, and then we got to say goodbye.
The very largest piece of the budget that he's going to be bringing forward, pieces actually, are things that he didn't run on. Massive increase in defense spending, dropping the counter tariffs that were revenue generating. a rollback on climate change commitments. So there's going to be quite a lot in there that is in fact not what Canadians voted for. So they have runway where they need to be explaining that and telling the story to Canadians about why these particular choices are necessary and why they might lead to benefit down the road, and that's not happening.
It might cause some of his ministers to swallow themselves whole, but whatever.
Right. Yes, which is something we may see. Amanda, last word to you, and then we got to go.
Well, I mean, I don't see it the way that some of my fellow panelists see it, not surprisingly. I think that, I think that Canadians are open to this style of communications. I think that they were expecting something very different from Carney. And I think that his approval rating, you may call it a honeymoon period, but we're many months in now. And I think his approval rating is holding because Canadians are prepared to give him a bit of grace to get some of these things done. I think promising is one thing, but actually being able to communicate on some of the concrete examples of partnerships and the things that he's doing elsewhere are going to matter more to Canadians. And I also think there's a lack of communications on some of the negotiations with the US for obvious reasons, because there's negotiation. The final word I'll say is that the budget will require its own stream of communications, and I would imagine that the Prime Minister and those who are involved aren't going to let that go through without a serious sales job.